A mother and daughter are found dead just hours before a hurricane strikes.
It looked like someone took advantage of the storm to commit a terrible crime.
When DNA evidence points police in multiple directions, a criminal profiler steps in to help.
It's not what the killer took, but what he left behind that led us to him.
A Category 5 hurricane is on its way towards South Florida. And Palm Beach County is in its path.
Right before the hurricane, things were quite chaotic.
Just hours before the storm hits, police get a call that a mother and daughter are dead in their apartment.
We have everything marked off and everything blocked off.
They were in the master bedroom. The older female, identified as Rita Beto, was lying on the floor face down. She appeared to have ligature marks on the wrist and ankles and a gunshot wound to the head. The younger Beto, Lisa, was found on the bed, multiple bruises on her arms and legs, and also suffered a gunshot wound to the head.
Deputies search the apartment for signs of a break-in or forced entry. There are none.
In the living room, there was signs of a struggle around the couch area.
A struggle that goes hand in hand with a robbery.
There was what appeared to be a television and possibly a VCR that was removed from the residence as we observed frayed wires.
And that's not all that's missing.
We learned that Lisa Beto drove a black Honda CRX. Upon checking the parking lot, we did not find her vehicle there.
Requesting a BOLO, reference signal 5, Honda CRX.
The hurricane is expected to make landfall in less than 48 hours. It may destroy the crime scene, and with it, any chance of finding the killer. Investigators hurry to collect as much evidence as possible before it's gone forever.
There was a pillow found in the bedroom that had 2 bullet holes in it. And we believe that's what the killer used to try to silence the gunfire.
Amidst the disorder, something stands out.
Cigarette butts were recovered in the crime scene, including one underneath the body of Lisa Beto, as well as an food container located in the living room.
Based on the information we had at this time, we knew that both victims did not smoke. We presumed that possibly the killer had left those cigarette butts.
While searching the house, deputies spot someone suspicious lurking around the crime scene.
A young male that lived upstairs trying to look into the windows. The neighbor identified himself as Gary Widmer, a friend of Rita Beto's. He had worked with her at Walmart.
It's what's in Widmer's hand that intrigues police. Cigarettes, and they appear to be the same brand as were found inside the Beto's apartment. On top of that, there's a bucket and cleaning supplies in his car.
It indicates to me that he was maybe trying to clean up a crime. The fact that he had the cleaning supplies and the fact that he stated he knew Rita and the fact that he was a smoker, we decided we were going to interview him further.
Police want Widmer's story and his DNA. But it won't come now because the hurricane is here. When it's over, 65 people are dead. Palm Beach County is a disaster area, which makes Detective Gary Martin's job more difficult.
The hurricane sort of was an obstacle to the investigation. We didn't get the number of tips that we probably would have where a mother and daughter are killed in their own home.
The first thing Detective Martin wants to do is talk to Gary Widmer, the man who was lurking outside of the Beto's apartment.
We asked him to come down to the sheriff's office headquarters to participate in an interview.
Widmer is no saint. He admits that he has been arrested for possession of drugs in another state, but that doesn't make him a murderer. To rule him in or out as a suspect, investigators ask Widmer for a DNA sample, but he refuses and abruptly ends the interview.
Based on the fact that Gary Widmer would not provide us with the DNA standard that we asked for, and that he very suddenly decided not to cooperate further, he became a strong person of interest.
Detective Martin turns to a criminal profiler to corroborate his suspicions about Widmer.
I got a call from the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. They asked me to review information that they had regarding a person of interest in the homicides of Rita and Lisa Beto. Detectives had every reason to be suspicious of Gary Widmer because he refused to give them a sample of his DNA.
But when Agent Hinman delves deeper into Gary Widmer's background, she has a surprise for detectives.
Based on the information I was provided, it didn't sound like Gary Widmer was responsible for the murders of Rita and Lisa Beto.
What does Agent Hinman know about Gary Widmer that the police don't? Agent Hinman meets Detective Gary Martin at the crime scene.
Dale, this is the apartment where the two women live. This is their master bedroom. Inside there is where they were both found. Up there is Gary Widmer's apartment.
How long had the victims lived in this apartment?
They had moved to South Florida from Connecticut about a year before this occurred.
Perhaps since they were new in the area, they didn't understand the magnitude of a Category 5 hurricane and didn't know that you were supposed to flee?
Yeah, that might be true. Just about everyone was boarding up and making their preparations and leaving the area.
Well, perhaps the offender in this case was just going out, looking in the neighborhood for access to different apartments to steal things, and happened upon these women who were still there, which would make them victims of opportunity as opposed to targeted victims.
And in the room where the struggle happened, the killer left something behind.
If you look here, there's a pie plate. If you look on top of the pie plate, you'll see that a cigarette had been crushed out.
Did you find other cigarette butts inside the residence?
Yeah, we found 4 other cigarette butts. Each of them were in the bedroom with the women.
Did either of the victims smoke?
Neither of the victims smoked.
So this means the offender felt comfortable enough inside of this apartment that he could stay and smoke 5 cigarettes. Perhaps he thought that nobody was going to come home and interrupt the crime, or possibly he's done other burglaries in the past and he's very comfortable in people's homes.
Next, Agent Hinman wants to see where the bodies were found.
Lisa Beto was found on this bed, and Rita Beto, her mother, was lying on the floor at her feet. Both Rita and Lisa Beto's hands and legs had been bound together.
The killer left behind a pillow that he shot through, but took the restraints and bullet casings with him.
Shooting the victims through the pillow suggests he's not sure who's home in the apartment complex, and so he doesn't know who's going to hear the sound of the gunshots. Removing the ligatures from the victims and then picking up the shell casings suggests that he is somewhat criminally experienced and he's trying hard or making at least some effort not to leave physical evidence behind. Was anything missing from the scene?
Yeah, we discovered that the television set and VCR were stolen from this television stand right here, and that it seems likely that he took the television set and VCR, put it in Lisa's automobile, and then stole her car from the home.
Walking away from a crime scene with a 19-inch television in your arms is something that's going to gain the attention of everybody around. This suggests that the offender in this case was either youthful or he was someone who was involved in drug use. Drug users take anything that can be sold or exchanged for drugs. It made sense that Gary Widmer was considered as a suspect in this investigation. He knew the Betos well, he knew their habits, and he had been in their apartment. But the fact that he lived in the same building actually pointed us away from him as a suspect. I think the fact that the car is missing and hasn't been found yet is really significant. If Mr. Widmer had committed this crime, then he shouldn't have taken the car. He should have just taken the TV and the VCR up the stairs. But the fact that the TV and VCR are gone and the car is gone, it's more likely that wherever the vehicle is found, it's going to be where the suspect lives in this case, because I think he took the car to transport those items.
Detective Martin reissues a Be on the Lookout for Lisa Beto's vehicle. While deputies search for the missing car, forensics experts analyze the cigarette butts for DNA.
If the crime lab could get DNA from the cigarette butts, then they could enter the profile into the nationwide database. If the Betos killer had been arrested in the past and his profile was in the database, then they'd get a hit.
Dr. Cecilia Kraus leads the investigation of the evidence.
It's our DNA or genetic material that makes us unique. When someone smokes a cigarette, they do leave behind saliva, but inside that liquid saliva are cells from the inside of the mouth, and that's where the DNA is. We cut off a small piece of the filter, and we place that filter in a small test tube, and we expose it to different chemicals, and those chemicals break open the cellular material. And when that happens, the DNA comes floating out.
Dr. Kraus is in luck. There's enough DNA on 3 of the cigarette butts to get a reading. She meets with Agent Hinman to go over the DNA profile.
The first thing that we see is that all 3 cigarette butts have the same DNA profile.
So that means that the same person smoked all of the cigarettes at the crime scene?
Yes, it does.
And you can tell if the person was a male or a female?
Yes. There's a genetic marker that's just specific for the genetic marker for sex typing. That indicates it was from a male. Mm-hmm. And we were able to take that genetic markers, put them together as a profile, and submit them into the National DNA Database.
So when somebody's arrested for another similar offense, their DNA will be put into the system, and then you'll be able to compare it to your case?
Yes.
But excluding someone from the crime can be just as crucial as including them.
Crime lab technicians ran the DNA profile against the database, hoping for a match, but they didn't get one.
It's not a dead end yet.
The nationwide DNA database is constantly being updated with new entries as offenders are being convicted for their crimes. We all felt that the person who killed Rita and Lisa Beto was likely to commit another violent crime, so sooner or later, he was going to end up in the database.
Then, Detective Martin gets a shocking call. Gary Widmer, the suspicious neighbor who refused to give a DNA sample, is dead.
Gary Widmer died of a drug overdose in another state.
Agent Hinman said that the killer is likely to be a drug user. And now that Widmer has overdosed, detectives no longer need permission to get a DNA sample.
The detectives knew that this was their opportunity to either confirm or eliminate Gary Widmer as the person responsible for this crime.
Will Widmer's DNA match? Or is there a killer on the loose? Gary Widmer, top suspect in the double murder of Rita and Lisa Beto, has died.
Legally, police can take DNA samples from someone after they're dead, even when they denied permission when they were alive. That meant that Gary Whitmer's DNA could be compared to the cigarette butts that were found at the crime scene.
But the results are not what police expect.
Mr. Whitmer was excluded as a contributor to the saliva from the cigarette butt.
Whitmer is eliminated as a suspect.
It turned out that Gary Whitmer's father had hired a lawyer, and it was the lawyer who advised Whitmer not to cooperate in the investigation.
The Hurricane Killer is still out there. Then, a deputy spots an abandoned vehicle in a parking lot.
Bolo referenced the Signal 5 vehicle.
It's Lisa Beto's stolen car.
Lisa Beto's vehicle was located approximately 3 miles from the crime scene. The vehicle was unoccupied.
We were very excited that the stolen automobile was recovered. We had high hopes that there would be physical evidence in the automobile that would lead us to the murderer.
After deputies impound the car, Agent Hinman observes as a crime scene technician inspects it for evidence.
Every square inch of the vehicle was vacuumed by the crime scene technician. The special filter on the vacuum collects any trace evidence, such as hairs or fibers, that may have been left by the offender.
Despite a lengthy investigation, there's not a shred of useful evidence.
The victim's car didn't contain any evidence of value to the investigation. There were no prints, no hairs, no fibers. The offender may have wiped down the car before he abandoned it.
Outside the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, Agent Hinman and Detective Martin review the results of the car inspection.
Lisa Beto's stolen car was recovered about 3 miles from where this crime occurred.
Well, that further reinforces our original assessment that he took the vehicle because he was transporting the television and the VCR in it, and he probably lives in the immediate vicinity of where the car was discarded. Have you had any other homicides with similar MO to this case?
No, we've checked the local police files and there's nothing similar. Does that suggest to you that maybe he might have fled the area?
It really does. I think that he probably will commit other crimes, but possibly not in this state, or we would have had one by now. And now the fact that you have DNA evidence is even more important, because if the offender commits another crime somewhere else in the country, he'll be identified through the DNA database.
Then, Dr. Kraus gets a call from a colleague in Wisconsin, and it could break the case wide open.
She asked if I was sitting down, and she said, "We got a hit," and I immediately said Beto.
The person who matched the DNA was serving time in a correctional facility in Green Bay.
Is the Hurricane Killer already in prison? Police are about to find out. In the double murder of Rita and Lisa Beto, investigators have found a DNA match to a suspect in Wisconsin.
When detectives investigated further, they could finally attach a name to the DNA profile: James Frederick.
Detective Martin interviews Frederick in Wisconsin.
When I confronted him with the fact that his DNA was found within the death scene, he said to me, "I guess I'm going to Florida." He knew he'd be standing trial eventually.
When Palm Beach authorities investigate Frederick's background, they find out that Agent Hinman was dead on.
James A. Frederick was a career criminal. He had been in institutions since he was a young man. He lived less than 6/10 of a mile from where Lisa Beto's vehicle was eventually recovered.
Frederick pleads guilty to first-degree murder. In court, he lashes out at the prosecution.
His courtroom actions told us a lot about his character. There was no doubt he was a violent offender.
I was a child who took care of me. And this is what turned out.
Frederick was convicted for the homicides of Rita and Lisa Beto and sentenced to life in prison. Rita and Lisa Beto were innocent victims of a career criminal who was a habitual drug user. He took advantage of an approaching hurricane to rob and murder them. Good police work and DNA technology closed this case.